arrived a little bit late, and I'll just invite the Mayor to propose a welcome and thank you.
Yes, thanks, George. Most of you know me. My name is George Sandigo. I'm the Mayor of the Shire. We have Deputy Mayor Sue Ruffles here as well, Councillors Jimmy Clark and Narelle Payne. Also, of course, George, who just spoke, was the General Manager, and Shane Wilson is the Deputy for Infrastructure. Before we commence, I want to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people, traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on here today. Pay my respect to the people both past and present, and also extend that respect to Aboriginal Australians who may be present today. So, sustainability is what's been on the minds of virtually every council in New South Wales in recent times, and so that's the reason that we're here today, to explain the proposal that's been put forward to you, and we certainly will take on board your comments so that the council can then decide what they might proceed with. So I'll ask George now to do a presentation, and you can ask questions through his presentation or afterwards about the presentation or anything else that you might like to talk about. So thank you very much also for coming out in numbers, because a fair bit of work goes into organising these things, and it's good to see that you're here. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Neville. As Neville said, I'm happy to take questions as we go. I've got about 22 or 3 slides here, so it normally takes half an hour, 40 minutes to get through, and some of it's fairly heavy, but nevertheless it is important that you get all of the information. The purpose of these consultations is to make sure that you have access to the information around the proposal to increase the rates. I've got a bit of an agenda here for the meeting, and so I want everyone to leave with a bit of an understanding of what's proposed, why it's happening, what it will mean for you as landowners, what the outcomes are going to look like, and how you can gain more info, make a submission, those types of things. So, as I said, I'm happy to take questions as we go. So, right to move on. Okay. So, I've been told a couple of times this week that I've been in local government for long enough, and I now start to talk like I live it. Sometimes I get into the jargon a bit too much, and if that happens this afternoon, pull me up. If you don't understand something I'm talking about, ask, and I'll try and go into some more detail. I know why you're here, because you've got a letter from me inviting you to come along and listen to the presentation, talk about what's proposed. I wanted to explain right up front why I'm here and why the councillors are here. The New South Wales government uses a number of pieces of legislation to control councils. We answer to them on everything we do. One of the most important pieces of legislation is the Local Government Act. And I've popped up on the screen there a paraphrase, if you like, of an early section out of that Act, Section 8. That requires or establishes a set of principles that every council has to try and meet. So responsible and sustainable spending, alignment of revenue and expenditure, achieving a fully funded operation, effective financial and good asset management it's just common sense mainly, but it's set out in the Act. The councillors and I feel that obligation. And so I'll explain the financial position of the council to you. We're at a point where we need to make some decisions. Even though we are constantly monitoring the operations of the council, we still need to make some changes. One of the important things that was added in there in the last few years is intergenerational equity, and I'm sure you all understand how that works. As I said in a meeting earlier today, in simple terms, it means that this generation can't leave the next generation worse off. So it's a balancing act, managing the council. We get resources from charges, from rates and from grants. Our budget's around the 30 million mark. From the rates that we're here to talk about tonight, this afternoon, we get about 5.5 million. The main grant that comes in from the federal government is now more than that. It's around 6.5 million. And we've got fees and charges and things like interest on investments and what have you that make up the difference. So we've got those resources. We don't make any money ourselves, and we don't have any businesses that make money. So we establish service levels that we're able to achieve in terms of quantity and frequency and quality. And at the end of the day, we try to have a balanced budget, I'm sure the same as you do. We're here to talk about rates, and this is a rate notice of a farm near Sandigo. It just happens that it's about an average size property. The rateable value, 2.47 million. And the rate's at 4,500. So I put that one in there because that's an average farm. I know that some of you own farms that are much greater in terms of value. Some own farms that are smaller. But the average is what we'll be using to make some comparisons as we go. That's not quite working. Here we go. Now, I said I wanted to talk about how the council's financial position has reached the point that it's at, and these are essentially some of the drivers that have been in play. You would have heard about rate pegging, I'm sure. It's been in place now since 1980. It's a requirement that was introduced by the state government, and in its early days, it was fairly random. So the Minister for Local Government would every year determine what he considered to be a reasonable amount that he would allow the councils to increase their rates by, and he'd issue that proclamation. And we were never able to find out how he worked it out or what he based it on. In 2011, they changed the system a bit so that IPART now make that decision. And it's a little bit more open in that they use a calculation based on what they call the Local Government Cost Index. So there's a little bit of information about how they work out what the annual rate peg is. One of the things that's been pretty consistent all the way through is that the allowed increase in revenue is usually less than the anticipated increase in expenditure. It's always less than CPI. And I have got a slide here somewhere that shows the historical trend, but it's always less than what I believe and council believes we should get. You know, in your own budgets, if you have a year where your income is restricted but your expenditure has to keep going, you make decisions around that. You tighten your belt. You don't do things that you might otherwise do, and you make do. If that circumstance keeps going for a few more years, then it becomes much more difficult. And you stop spending in areas where you probably should be spending. No investment in new machinery, new assets, that type of thing starts to happen. You eat into your reserves. So I want you just to imagine that circumstance for 40 years. Narrandera Council has never applied for a special variation before this one. Whatever that rate pegging limit has been set at, that's what's been used. Now I should just qualify that a little bit. 3 years ago, IPART came up with a crazy 0.7 as the rate peg limit, and all the councils in New South Wales were granted a 2.5% increase. Now, the minister had the power to overrule, and that's what she did. So I talked about asset investment falling away. On the council website there is a lot of material, a lot of background material that I'd invite you to have a look at it, including my report to the council in the September meeting. There's asset management plans there, and there's a lot of detail that shows information around our assets. Council controls a bit over $300 million worth of assets, and because the investment in assets has been lower than it should have been, we've got a backlog, and that backlog's about $16 million. So one of the things that we're trying to overcome with this special variation is to stop that downward trend. Start getting additional funds that can be invested into the roads, the buildings, our facilities. I mentioned earlier that we're talking about budgets and cost increases that you can't control. We have those too. It doesn't matter what we do in terms of services. We have to pay the state government the overheads that are required. A good example of that is the emergency services levy. So every council in New South Wales makes a contribution to the cost of running the RFS, the SES and the town fire brigades. In the last 12 months, our contribution has gone up from 200-odd thousand to 300-odd thousand in one go. And we don't have any choice. When they told us what the budget was, they sent the invoice at the same time. There's a bunch of other things that the state government do in terms of governance. They require us to have in place. So internal audit committees are good examples of that. And unfortunately, look, there's a steady stream of councils in New South Wales that get themselves into trouble, either by bad behaviour or financial mismanagement. And so a lot of these controls are justified, but they do tend to have a one-size-fits-all approach, and therefore we're caught up in those requirements. We've had a very successful internal audit committee for nearly 10 years, but it doesn't meet the new standards. So we've had to ramp up what we use it for, how it operates, what the support structures are for that committee, and every time you turn around, that costs more money. They know that, but they never factor any of that stuff into this local government cost index. They expect the councils to magically find what they need to do that. You'll obviously all recall 2022, the flood events. Some areas still trying to recover from that. In Narrandera, we had 2 very severe storm events in January, one the first week and one the last week, and both of those events put water in the main street. We had flooding in houses and flooding in shops. Taloka House was evacuated. We had a public meeting just like this one in Narrandera a week later. I think it coincided with our normal listening post routine. And the people that turned up to that meeting fairly gave it to us. They demanded to know why the situation occurred, why the council hadn't fixed it before. I know why. Previous councils have never had the resources to do that. So following that meeting, we set about, okay, well, the community want that to occur, so we have had consultants in, we've had some minor improvements done to the existing drainage, but the plan that they've come up with is basically a duplication of the main drain that takes water from up around near the bowling club and beyond in Victoria Avenue, picks up the water down Bolton Street into Adams on the other side of the park and off down into the canal. And that sounds great, but it's going to cost $16.5 million to do it. Now there's a grant program, and I'm going to talk about grant programs a bit more broadly in a moment, but there is a grant program for flood mitigation work. It requires a contribution by the council. Now that contribution could be 10, might be 20%. We don't have the resources to do that at the moment. So part of this special variation is to fund the loan repayments on what might be our contribution. With all of this stuff going on over a period of time, the council has developed what I'm going to call a structural deficit. Now it's mainly caused by the lack of asset investment and the funds that would be otherwise used not being available, and so there's this situation where we have, as I said, structural deficits. In our financial reports, which are on the website every year, there's a set of indicators that the government require us to report against. Things like asset investment is one of those. Another one is own source revenue. So we go cap in hand to the state government and the federal government on a regular basis. We want to maximise the grant income. But those governments have said to us, we're happy to help, but you've got to raise locally your share of the funds. The benchmark that they have set is 60%. There's no way we can get near that. We're allowed to include the financial assistance grant, the federal grant, in our calculations, but we're still around the high 40s, 50s. We need to raise more money locally. Into sort of 2012, I think it was, the state government commenced a process of reviewing councils' long-term sustainability. And those of you that have been around for a while will remember that, and possibly the term fit for the future. That was just a tagline that the Minister for Local Government introduced, but associated with the tagline was a set of benchmarks and requirements that councils all over New South Wales had to measure themselves against. As a result of that, Narrandera Council developed an improvement plan, and we've been working on that ever since. And there's a copy of that plan on the website. So we are constantly trying to look at ways of improving our long-term sustainability. And there's still things to be done in that improvement plan that we're looking at now, moving forward. But that's part of the deal. We certainly don't want Narandra Council to get into a position where the government's going to come in and say, listen, you blokes, you're not sustainable, we're going to sort you out and put you in with an adjoining council. So that's what's happened. That is exactly what happened in 2015, and they're still trying to undo some of those mistakes now. This it's problematic, this thing. These are just a couple of examples of cost increases that I'm sure you know well in your own businesses. Council buys major items on a group basis. We tender and we try to get together with other councils so that we can maximise the power of the purchase. And electricity is one of those. So 4 years ago, with 28 other councils in New South Wales, we went out to tender and we got a really good result. So up until December 22, we were paying 10.4 cents a kilowatt. And that's pretty good. But that contract ran out. So the 28 councils went back out to the market and the result was 37 cents. Not quite so bad with fuel. In 2020, diesel was $1.12 a litre. Now we're paying, last month we were paying $1.90. It's probably closer to $2.15 now. I mentioned the ESL. I'm sure you guys are all experiencing the same sort of cost increases. In Narandra Shire, every council has a slightly different rate structure and they're not prescribed. In our council, this is the structure that we have in place at the moment. So there are three essentially different types of rates. There's farmland, there's residential, and there's business. Under the regulation, farmland rating has to be the cheapest, and by far the cheapest here at 18 cents in the dollar, with a minimum of 510. Residential, 69 cents, 61 cents, similar minimums. Business, it's higher again. Essentially, where I've used the word other, that means Grong and Barellan. Narandra stands out by itself. So that's our current rate structure. And on the right-hand column, you can see the yield. And that should add up to somewhere around $5.5 million. So 3.2 million comes from our farmers. I've got a slide, I think, that talks about those percentages. Yeah, here it is. So the farming community at the moment contribute 58% of the general rate. Residential properties, 33%. Businesses, 9%. As I said, general rates are increased each year by the rate peg limit. Now, it's not so important out here because you don't have any of these services, but in Narandra, charges for water, sewage and waste are set separately and they're not part of this exercise. So those numbers that you're looking at, that's just the general rate itself. So in my letter, we talked about special variation. There's a bunch of regulation around the rate peg limit and IPART, and included in that is a provision where councils are unable to raise enough money locally using the standard, they are able to go down this special variation process. And it is pretty complex and it's not cheap. There's been a lot of work go into getting to the point we're at the moment. A special variation can be either temporary or permanent. The one that we're looking at is permanent. It can be introduced over 1 year or a period of years. There's two options in your paperwork, a 1-year implementation or a 2-year. I think Griffith Council who are going through a similar process, maybe they're at 3 or 4 years, a slow and gradual introduction. Now, I said that this is not unusual. There's 128 councils in New South Wales and 79 of them have followed this process since 2016. And some of them have done it more than once. It's expected. Locally, I mentioned Griffith, they're going through the process. Junee Council went last year, Federation Council went last year. If you're associated with Leeton, you'll remember the community consultation process that they went through. But nearly all the rural councils in New South Wales have done this. Narrandera have never done it before. Doesn't like working, that thing. So this is the proposed SV. The base case line shows what will happen if there's no special variation. IPART have indicated to us that they are looking at 3.5% increase next year and 2.5% the following year. The two options that are out for consultation, a 1-year implementation of 41.5%. Now that includes the 3.5%, so it's 38 plus 3.5%. Or, on the bottom line, a 2-year implementation, which would be 25.5%, followed by another 18%. The numbers don't quite add across because they're percentages on percentages. So you might well ask, well, what are you going to do with the money? Yes, it's ongoing. And all of these costs are ongoing. So if it goes through, it'll generate about 2.3 million. It will enable the council to maintain current services and to fund more of the depreciation. And depreciation is the way that local government uses for that intergenerational equity. We'd have our share of the money needed for Narrandera stormwater, and we could start to turn that asset backlog around. So some of the roads in this part of the Shire that are in poor condition could be improved. Oh. I've got a slide that... That's correct.
So really, for us to want to agree to this, we need to be seeing tangible change in the rural areas and not just in town.
You know, that's what you're saying is really true and important. And I mentioned earlier about making a submission. Please.
So my submission's going to be pretty long.
That's fine. The councillors will be considering the submissions in November. And the issue around the heavy lifting is going to be one of those things on the table.
So I might as well ask a question now. Why are we getting hit with the same increase as the people in town? Why can't that be split so that we don't have such a breathtakingly gigantic amount of money that we're going to have to find in the next 2 years and going forward? It's breathtakingly gigantic.
Yes.
When we look at the amount that we're going to pay. So I might as well just jump in and ask that question.
No,
I'm pretty sure everyone here wants to know.
that's fine. Look, if I talk about the stormwater system, for example, right, there will be direct benefit to a small number of properties. And the council could have taken the decision to introduce a local rate. It would have been difficult to do because you rate the properties that benefit and you rate the properties that cause. So you'd be familiar with Narrandera. Everything east of East Street drains through East Street, except for the bit that goes into the canal. So Pine Hill Road, a lot of Red Hill, even up where I am, that water all finds its way down into this wretched drain under the newsagent. Council looked at that really hard. They talked about it. We talked about it. And we believe that the people that will benefit from that drainage system being implemented are much broader than just the ones that own the properties near there. So,
But my question was, why? Having read what I've read so far, I'm failing to comprehend why we're going to have to keep doing that ridiculous amount of heavy lifting going forward. I can understand this if you said, look, it's 2 years that you guys are going to be hit with this. I could sort of see the rationale behind that. But for this to be a permanent increase, I just am failing to make it make sense.
okay.
On an ongoing basis.
I should have said at the beginning of the meeting, and I have been saying this, the purpose of these meetings is to make sure that you've got the information you need to form a view and to act on that view, to make a submission to do what you need to do. I'm endeavouring to do that. One of the things that I won't do is argue with you.
No, that's okay.
So
It's more just trying to get the...
I understand what you're saying, right? I know that the percentages are real dollars, and for most of the farmers, they're big dollars. That balance in the rates is historical. It's been there for well before my time. I didn't create it. The current council didn't create it. But it's with an exercise like this, it's biting. So with the stormwater system, I'm pleased that you probably recognise that more people benefit. I mean, I'm sure that if it floods again, the chemist will shut. We can't afford to lose it. Everyone gets a benefit out of that, not just the people that live close or have buildings close. The asset backlog of 960,000, our biggest asset by far are the roads. In the paperwork that's on the website, there's a table that shows the dollars of assets and their condition. I would want to see improvement across the range of those assets, including the roads. And that will be a direct benefit to the farmers. I mentioned the technology and compliance upgrades. We think that's going to cost about $240,000 ongoing on current dollars. In 2001 or 2002, the then senior management bought the computer system that we rely on now. So it's 20 years old. And I think you all understand enough about computer systems. They don't go on forever. I need to do something about it. And 90% of computer systems now, you don't buy what's in the box, you pay every year. One of the issues that we have tried to address is our lack of competition in the labour market. I've got consultants operating at the moment, analysing our salary system and making comparisons across the Murrumbidgee. We believe that our labour market, our salary system is below the labour market. It's one of the reasons why it's nearly impossible for me to fill some positions.
That's everybody.
I understand.
Everybody's all too paying for people to work.
In some cases that's true, John. In many cases, though, I can't attract someone because Leeton Council's paying 10,000 or 20,000 more than I'm offering. And that sort of information is fed to me all the time. I talked last night about plant operators, about backhoe operators. You know, I advertise a backhoe operator's position at 60,000 and Boots are paying them 120. You know, I've got no chance. I'm not talking about offering 120. I can't afford to do that. Yeah, yeah. And the one Boots operator that we get to get, that lady's damn good. Probably the best around. I want the council to be in a position where we can match infrastructure grants, and typically the federal grants require a local contribution. They just won't give you all the money. You've got to have some. And I've got a slide in a minute about other opportunities that the community broadly would like the council to at least have a chance at.
With the labour market, is that going to include a probable raise for the councillors themselves?
No, you know what happens with councillors? Yeah, it's not set by IPART, but it is set by the local government remuneration tribunal. They have grouped councils into certain groups, and nearly all of the rural councils, the size of Narrandera, including Leeton, all the ones around here, all the councillors are paid the same money, and so is the mayor. Typically they're at the maximum, and there is a small margin. My opinion, I wouldn't be a councillor for the money that they get.
No, they should be there for the Shire, not themselves. Just like politicians. They're countries, not themselves.
Yeah, and that's a really good philosophical position to adopt, but the reality is that I work the councillors hard. They can't do their job properly unless they're committed and spending the time, and it is a lot of time. You know, they deserve to be paid a lot more. We worked it out one day. The mayor gets paid less than the cleaner in the council chambers. You know, it's yeah, but in terms of hours spent, I've got the mayor in the office every day for at least an hour.
Yeah, that's right, but he has another job out of that. He doesn't hold somebody to do that only.
No, he doesn't. And obviously he can't, because you can't survive on mayoral allowance or councillor allowance, that's for sure. Our councillors get paid.
You're not going to have any trouble getting workers very shortly, because all these blokes in here are going to be looking for a job, because their full sales sign's going to be at the front of their farms. That's what's going to happen.
All right.
We can't push. How can we move on our cost of production? How do we force it on? Lands in Wagga today is $3. 72,000 lands in Wagga today. How are we meant to make money? 1,000 lands is $3,000, but yet we've got to pay you 12 or 14 or 15,000. So tell me how that adds up. I'm really not sure. Yeah, you can't pay the rates on the value of the farm. You can only pay your rates on profitable money. So how do you expect these blokes that have had, what, 3 pretty ordinary years in a row and another one just about to for crop growers, how do you expect them to pay their rates? Like, some of these blokes, 12 bags is cost of production. So what are they? Yeah, they might be able to go and kill a sheep or kill a cow, but there's more to it than that. They need to pay their bills, and if they can't pay their bills, what have they got?
Yeah, unfortunately the rating system doesn't work like that. It works on the value of your property. Now,
Well, okay, that's fine, and I agree with what you're saying,
Yeah, I don't know how it works. The Valuer General work out the land values, not the council. They give us those values every year, and we ask them, how did you work this out? What is it based on? And the answer that normally comes back is that it's based on market value and recent sales in the area. Now, my view is that the land prices in the Shire are pretty high, and they've been going up pretty markedly. I know a couple of properties where the values have doubled. But I also took some time today to have a look back at sales, farm sales in the Shire, going back probably nearly 18 months. Most sales are getting between 2,500 an acre and 3,000 an acre. Maybe not, but that's what's been happening. And some of those sales are not far from here. Yep. Yeah. For the two highways, are you talking about one of the highways? Yeah. Is this, in your opinion, is the circumstance you're talking about, could that be fixed? Like, there was an awful lot of water around in those floods.
Yeah, that's right too, but that was 3 times in a 12-month period. My farm is the start of the water flow, and I had to drive through water. If I opened my door in the full drive, it would have run in the ute on the floor beam. And that's on the start of the water flow. My farm is probably the highest of any farm around.
Can you, so you can thank him for the water? Yeah, look. All right, well, look, before you go, can you talk to Shane and just point out that area you're talking about, and we'll have a look at it to see if there is something we can do. But yeah, okay. Yeah, well, they take them pretty much wherever they like. But I don't know whether it's a good idea to be taking the kids through floodwater that's that deep, to be honest. All right, so Shane just mentioned these are some roads that are slated for improvement in the next little while, but there'll be more to follow and we're still trying to work out what we can do with the sealed road network. Now, this work is not dependent on the rate increase. This work's being funded out of flood damage. Yeah.
So if the road will be sitting coming out of what, two,
So it needs to be sealed. So now we've got the opportunity to put that on the bricks and put
just
that.
on that, cheaper bits stuff,
We're not going further than that.
where it has been like,
I appreciate that. We agree having a lot of that stuff. But we will be doing a combination of between the grant funding that where we do a full reshoot, and then what we do is with our own source money, we've got important critical roads with the flat top. Take the opportunity to bring up the standard, so we don't have to worry about next year for a grade and things like that.
So this slide has got some comparative figures on it. As I said, we've got three categories of rates: residential, business and farmland. And where it's got the word Narrandera, that means Narrandera Shire, not just Narrandera Town. I've had to use the 21-22 figures here for comparison because many councils haven't finished their 22-23 financials, and we've had to rely on this stuff. But those relativities are real. So at the moment, in terms of residential rate, our average property is sitting at $6.99. The Group 10, and did I explain that? We're in a group of 21 other councils. They're supposedly similar, scattered all over New South Wales. They all have the same characteristics where they're rural. They've got a reasonable town and a fairly substantial road network. So $6.99, the average of that group of councils is $848 at the moment. In terms of business rates, Narrandera is sitting at $12.33. The Group 10 average is $1,676, and I've popped Leeton and Griffith in there for comparative purposes. We're not in their group; they're in a different group, but we do have a fairly close relationship with Leeton. Lockhart, I think Lockhart's in the Group 10. Wagga certainly not. Yep. That's true. But those Group 10 average councils, they're the same as us. They're not irrigation councils. Wagga, I don't know what their rates are, but they're in a group with the other regional centres. So Griffith and Wagga would be in the same group. Yeah. I don't doubt that Wagga's rates are low. They've got 60,000 people. We've got 6. Yeah. They do. And in the farmland one, and this is where Lee's comments are very relevant, at the moment, or in 21-22, our average farm rate was sitting at $3,669. The group average is $3,100, which is less, and Leeton and Griffith were about the same.
Is that on a value, farm value?
Yeah, that's on a whole farm unit, what they pay in rates.
Is that the cents per value?
Yeah. Well, that's the dollars that result from that, yes. I don't think so. Not by these figures anyway. Yes. If the increase goes ahead, the right-hand column has got the outcomes. So in a residential sense, Narandra would be a little bit higher than the Group 10 average, but still less than Leeton and Griffith. For businesses, it's less than the Group 10 average, but more than Leeton, and about half what Griffith charge. Typically in those larger regional centres, they rate their businesses pretty high. In terms of farmland, our average rate would be 5,700, and that's much higher than the Group 10 average. It's simply the fact that we've put the 41% in there, and we haven't got any increase like that for the Group 10 average. It's only going up by the rate peg. The residential one, 18 point something cents. I don't know. All we looked at was the dollars that were charged, not the rate in the dollar. I could find out, but I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah. Well, that could be a factor of the land value. And is it an irrigated property? That's interesting. It's sometimes it is a little bit dangerous looking at averages, because there's often no farm that's on the average. Included in that structure of the rates are minimum rates, not quite so relevant for farmland, but for business and residential, there's a minimum rate that everyone has to pay. And if the increase comes ahead, the second column there shows the result. In terms of residential properties on the minimum, most of those are in Grongrong and Barellan. They're currently on 510, they'd go to 720. I guess we've got a few farmland properties on the minimum. Currently they're at 510 and they would also go to 720. I don't think there's a large number of those. They'd be quite small properties. Now I'll show you these 4 slides. They go into more detail in terms of those rates. So Narandra residential increase, there's 1,475 properties there that would have an increase of less than $325. There are a few small number of properties that are much more valuable, and they would therefore have a larger increase. Yeah, yep. Yeah, it's blue on mine and purple up there. I don't know how that works. I mentioned Grongrong and Barellan. They're the main of these properties on the minimum. And as I said, there's 382 of those, and they would have an increase of $210. But again, there's a small number of properties that would go up by more than that. In terms of the Narandra businesses, there's 76 at less than $300, another 70 at less than $500, and another 70 at less than $1,000. I think the average business increase was somewhere around $500. The average farm increase is $1,500, and the average residential one's about $300. and these are the farmland ones. So you can see there that there's a fairly even spread. There's 160 properties where the increase would be less than $500. There's another 170 where it would be under 1,000, and there's another 270 where it would be less than 2,000. But there is a number of properties where the increase would be much more, and we've got 7 where it will be over $10,000. They're all in the bottom end of the Shire. I think 5 of them front the river, and 2 of them are on Yanko Creek. Yeah.
I just don't know if that has been communicated well enough through to the powers that be.
You bought multiple properties, so then you buy the payment rates, but you break it down into those individual properties, not by the
Not like who owns, use the rate plan.
These are based on valuations, individual valuations. So you probably if you've got 3 or 4 farms, even if they're side by side, yes, you'd be affected by that. But you might have 3 or 4 farms in the grey that combine make one farm in the yellow. Is that what you're saying? Or more? Yeah.
And that's where I think there is a disconnect between the impact that this has on people in town who have a single residential property and who are wage earners and are receiving a set income. We don't have any of that.
No.
So we are not only paying, maybe have multiple properties that this is then suddenly impacting in a greater degree, we have no control over our income either. So that's why I think there has been a simmering thing with the farmland disconnect to people who are wage earners in town. And it's not to be an us versus them attitude, it's that we're looking at apples and oranges in regards to the impact that this has.
Yeah. I'll look forward to your submission. Well, it's a real issue. It's a
And that's where I'm not trying to sound angry or anything. I just want to really clarify that what we have just been presented demonstrates this disconnect because it's real, and I just wanted to make sure that when I do my submission that I am not off on a tangent that
Really that graph there, George, probably should put it down to individual rate payers. I think you'll find that it's better.
it changes.
It changes better graph to that.
yeah. Yeah.
So what? We pay 18 cents in the dollar now.
Yeah.
What will the new rate be? Cents in the dollar?
Well, I haven't actually worked that out, but I'm assuming that it'll be 40% greater than that. So it could be 25, 9, 26 maybe, somewhere around there.
Aren't these figures based on the cents in the dollar that we would be charged?
Yes, they are, but I'm presenting them in dollar terms, not the original. Yeah, yeah. And it is slightly affected by the minimum calculation as well, but it'll be in that order. So, well, I got asked this question last night actually, and I remember I had a real estate bloke working for me for a while, and one day he gave me a cartoon of a really old gentleman with a long beard, and on the bottom it said something along the lines of, "This fellow's waiting for the land values to go down." Now, it can happen. It can happen, for sure. But the way the rates work is that it probably won't make much difference, because all of the land value in the Shire is amalgamated, calculated by multiplying the rate in the dollar, and there's a resultant income. And it really doesn't matter what happens to individual properties in the middle of that. The council is only allowed to levy based on the amalgam at the approved rate of, in the past it's been 2.5%, 3%, something like that. And when the Valuer General comes through, he values properties on what happens around them, so he says. And so in the last two valuations, properties at the northern end of the Shire have actually gone up by more than the values of properties in this part of the Shire. Now, you would know better than me what that has meant for your rates. They may not have gone up by the full percentage, because your land value actually decreased a little bit by comparison to some other properties. It's not an exercise that I do, but you're technically you're correct. Land values could go back down, but if they went back down evenly across the Shire, it wouldn't have any impact on the rate. So would I. That won't make any difference either, because if everyone goes up by the same amount, the resultant product will be the same. The only time that'll make a difference to you is if your property goes up by a different rate to your neighbours, and that has happened. Yes.
And our value goes up to 1.2 million, we'll be paying for an extra $200,000.
No, it doesn't work like that.
It's normally equal, so let's say it's $6 million. But it's going to be that right short. The thing is, we're still capped. So no matter how high your properties go, we're still capped at that $6 million plus the rate there. So we're capped at the total pool, not the per property pool. So if all of your properties went up 20%, and every meeting, all this would mean is that the rates will increase. You're like lump sum. We're lump sum, we're capped at total cost, not at individual property. That's where it takes out the piece of cost.
So the only increases that we'll be allowed to capitalise on will be if there's no special variation, then the total pool of rate income will go up by 3.5% next year, and the year after it'll be 2.5. If the SV goes through, then it'll be 41.5. But that doesn't reflect what might happen to individual properties, because the balance could change. You know, it shouldn't change a lot, but there are plenty of exceptions where I was talking to a bloke last night in Grong, and his property's gone from 30,000 to 120 in the village in the last valuation. One of the things about land values that you need to keep in mind, if you can, is that the Valuer General sets them. He writes to you with a form that says this is what we've valued your property at, and you have the right to challenge that. Sometimes I know people that have been successful, but that's something that you can do, and I can't do. I can't challenge your valuation. We don't have anything to do with setting it, despite rumours. They do it, and they write to you, and then if you don't agree that it's market value, but I think you'll have trouble arguing the point, because all those sales that I've seen today, the sale prices were well over the land values. And some of them were, as I say, pretty close to $3,000 an acre. They are, yeah, but the in theory, yes. But the valuer general uses those sales. That's what they use. And sometimes it comes down to their opinion. I wanted to just mention some of these things because I did talk about other opportunities. And things come along that from time to time where I want the council to be able to respond. And I'm sure you do too. Maintaining the quality of life in the Shire is fundamental. But the community look to the council to pursue economic growth and population growth. Things like the Airline Pilots Academy. That's an opportunity that no other council in New South Wales has got. If we don't grab hold of that, that's 30, 40 or 50 jobs we'll miss out on. Pardon? Why is that unique to Narendra? Well, they've Rex, and I'm sure they won't mind me talking about them, they do most of the basic pilot training in the industry in New South Wales. They bought the academy in Ballarat to start with, and they've recently closed it down. They built one in Wagga because that's where Rex have their foundations. They were a creation of Hazeltine and Kendall, and poor old Max just passed away recently. But they call Wagga home, so their training academy is based down there. Now, before COVID, they had come to us and they said, we've got an opportunity to double our training capacity by training pilots for China and Asia. China needed some extraordinary number of pilots. And so we said, well, Narendra is a perfect opportunity for you because we've got the facility, we've got the room, and you already land there as a passenger operation. And we made a proposal to them and they accepted it. So we've established in the house that's at the airport a little satellite operation. So they put the kids in the planes and fly them over to Narendra, and they do touch and goes. Sometimes they land, sometimes they take them into the house and do lectures, that type of thing, as a bit of a satellite. Now, unfortunately, COVID put the kibosh on some of that, and so nobody was talking to China for 2 years, 3 years. That relationship's still only just coming back now. The businesses in Narendra will gain out of it. There'll be employment at the place. We would anticipate that their senior trainers would live here. Who knows? I mean, there might be other industry that could be associated with that. So it's a bit of a key thing, and we're really trying to cultivate our relationship with Rex, who are in fact going through a really hard time. Some people would argue that it might be deserved, but nevertheless, Qantas is raiding their pilots. They can't keep their planes in the air at the moment, and so they've had to cut back on some of their flights. And we're going to be back to, at the moment we're back to 2 a day. We could find that we eventually go back to 1 a day for a while. So hopefully they'll be able to turn that around. But generally speaking, I'm told that people that are trained as pilots have an ambition to fly with Qantas and Virgin rather than the smaller providers. So there's a big competition for pilots. But we want to get that opportunity if we possibly can. We've sold all the land in the current industrial estate, and there's new businesses establishing out there, and a couple of them are fairly major. Buller, steel fabrication company, much bigger than Hutchins, and they've started establishing their factory. They've bought parcels of land to build houses on in town. We believe they're coming. We want to attract the next Buller. To do that, we've got to establish the next phase of the industrial estate. We need money to do it. Now, ultimately, what happens with that land is you sell it to the guy who comes along and builds his factory. But you've got to establish the estate first. And that sort of development is not cheap. It does. We do own a parcel of land that's very close to the highway on the exit to Grong Grong. It doesn't front the highway itself, but it's land that's basically east of the tip. And you could see development from the highway if it was established there. We want to do the land that's currently between the existing estate and the golf course first. And then hopefully the demand will be there and we'll have to expand into the other area, but it would be a second phase type of development. You know, and it's really annoying because look, there's a lot of political decisions around, and you see the outcomes of those in places. You know, the developments in Wagga, Parks, kissed on the nose, Parks. Down the bottom there, I've got a wish list of other things that are not part of the financial analysis that we've done, but they're nice to do, or they could be valuable to do. So things like you would have seen in the media, the talk about public housing, social housing, affordable housing, whatever you want to call it, aged care. I just use those words, but most towns have some capacity for independent living. Narrandera relies on the private investment to provide units and flats and small developments like that. Lake Talbot needs to be deepened. And we've done the studies. We've got consultants who are in the final stages of doing the environmental and getting those approvals, and we'll be in a position to go to the government and say, how about it? We need 2 million. And they'll say, great, here's our 1.5. You find the rest. Well, yeah, I didn't mention it, and I should have. The meeting's being recorded. But during the 1819 dry time, Lake Talbot was the centre of that type of recreational activity around, because Lake Albert was kaput. Griffith had algae every second week. So it is an important facility. Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, to do it is not a simple fix. You've got to get the water out, excavate, I don't know how many 100,000 tonnes of fill that's got to go somewhere. So I want to be able to respond. The Barellan flood levy, we've done most of the homework on that. It's a $5.5 million job. Again, the council will be asked to find its share. Probably. My spell checker in my head's not working properly. Yes, you're right. Well, you can take it whichever way you like, but you're entirely correct. Whoa. Next one. There we go. So, as I said earlier, oh, goodness me. As I said earlier, the process for a special variation is pretty complex, and it does require a lot of homework. We've done that. One of the pieces of work is an assessment of the community's capacity to pay, and that report is on the website, and I would suggest that it's good reading. In brief terms, what it shows is that there's an uneven spread of capacity. We're not unusual or unique in that regard. We've got our share of socio-economically disadvantaged, all the way up to some fairly significant people who are reasonably well off by comparison and certainly have capacity to pay. Now, the numbers that are in there are not ours. We paid the consultant. The consultant uses the information out of the census. So essentially, that's your information that you've provided. They make a comparison between the 16 census and the 21, and they come up with their recommendations. And IPART want to read that. They want to see that. They want to know what's the ability of the community to do this. For those that are...
Does the data provide a good context to IPART, or just as a series of numbers that just sort of reflect stuff? You know what I mean? Like, are they putting in the background information as well in a written context to give them the detail about why?
Yeah. For those that are really disadvantaged, there's a pensioner rebate scheme and there's a hardship policy. And that's pretty typical in most councils. Now, I've been here 6 years. We have not had a single application under that hardship policy.
Just do one for all of the southern part of the Shire.
Well, I think you've raised already some relevant information issues. So there's 2 slides now on outcome, but every coin's got 2 sides. If it goes ahead, these are the things the council will be able to do. So we'll be able to tick the financially sustainable box, but importantly, there'll be no ongoing deficits. So if you look at the long-term financial plan at the moment, there's a fair few red numbers at the bottom over time. Council would continue to deliver current services. Now, in some areas, you might think that's not very much. You've told me that before. Oh, I had people, not last night, the night before, demanding that we mow Kamara Road. Yeah. Well, that's true, and that's what I did explain to that gentleman. We can't mow everyone's nature strip. We can't mow all the gateways on all the farms. Just doesn't, it's not possible. We'd proceed with the technology and the compliance upgrades. The compliance upgrades have to happen anyway. We'd be competitive in the search for talent, and we'd be in a position to match infrastructure renewal and any grants that might come along. You might have read in the news or heard on the grapevine that there's a few councils in New South Wales that have got themselves into bad trouble. Central Coast Council was one I'm free to mention because it was largely publicised, but there are a number of others. One of the aspects of local government is that the various buckets of money are separate. So if you think about the Barellan sewage scheme that's going in at the moment, the people that have to pay for that scheme are the ones that are connected to it. Narandra water supply, they want a new filtration plant. It's going to cost, goodness only knows, 25 million or something. The cost of doing that's got to be met by the people connected to that water supply. I can't ask the farmers to contribute to that. That's illegal and pretty immoral anyway. So
But didn't you just ask us to pay for the flood thing in Miranda or the township? Isn't that?
yes, because I believe you benefit from that. You use the shops in the main street, you use other facilities in Narandra. Yeah. Now you might use it to a less extent than others, but that's your decision. So we're talking about general fund stuff only, which means that when we have a situation like the floods, and you'd all remember that, we've got to go and respond to those emergencies, and that invariably costs a fair bit of dough, straight up. So we've got to have money available for that. I can't take money out of other buckets to do it. It's got to be in the general fund.
This 19.9 million, is that banked or invested?
It is largely invested, yes.
How is that invested?
Well, it's a complicated question you ask. The state government set criteria for the investment of local government money. And typically, we've got to invest in AAA or AA rated financial institutions. Essentially, that means banks. There have been some dodgy deals done in the past. Can't do it anymore. You've got to have your money in a reputable bank, financial institution, and that's monitored by the state. So if you look in our normal monthly business paper, you'll see the list of those investments and where that money is. Typically, it's a mix of terms, so there'll be some short-term stuff, some longer-term stuff. It depends whether interest rates are going up or going down, where you put it. No. The last significant loss that local government suffered was in the GFC days, 2008. I was working at a council and I was astounded, but that council had money invested in the Commonwealth Bank and we lost $1 million. Couldn't get it back.
Is there any concern for losses in the next couple of years?
Not that I'm aware of, no. No.
Is
So with that 19 million, it's invested in a number of buckets and set in reserve by the council for a number of reasons. Some of that's for project work, but a lot of it's for things like employee leave entitlements, which we are legally required to have, those types of things. Now, I did provide a list of those in my report to council at the September meeting. So if you want to get into more detail, hop on the website and you'll be able to see that. But just finishing off my story about the buckets, when the floods came, this guy started work the next morning. That night, we had to fund that emergency work. So you can't have a council that's so close to the line that you lose that capacity. The state government has a flood relief scheme. It finances councils' flood repairs in two forms. There's an emergency repair, which you're allowed to go out and do and then claim. We got the money for that in September. That's this September. So we've carried that for nearly 18 months. The second phase of the repair work is you have to go out and do an assessment, calculate what the work's going to cost, make a submission, they approve it, and then you do the work. And we've just got that approval. So over the next 2-3 years, we'll be able to do that more substantial repair.
Has that kept up with CPI increase?
So that's what I'm talking about with current challenges.
You told us here you're going to become financially sustainable by jacking up the rates. What are other strategies you've got? Because as I understand it, between 2004 and 2024, 33, the staffing levels have more than doubled. You're treating people going up at the same rate, or you're going to do something to make it council more efficient.
Two answers. I don't know what numbers you're talking about because I wasn't here in... Right. Yeah. Well, I came to the council in 17 and the staff complement there was almost the same as it is now. It's hardly moved in the last 5 years. But I can understand why it would have increased substantially from 2004. The council does things now that it didn't do then. So, for example, we have community transport and there's a number of staff that run that facility. Compliance requirements, where we've got to do things now in terms of risk management and safety and stuff like that that didn't exist in 2004. So that might have had something to do with it. Was it on the highway? Right. Must have been a very important sign. Anyway, to answer the other part of your question, I mentioned earlier about the Fit for the Future improvement plan. There's action in there that has already been taken. There's some that we're doing at the moment, and there's some for the future. So yes, we're going to try and keep our eye on the ball and not let things go back to the old inefficient ways of doing things.
The other question is, how do you deal with depreciation when Commonwealth government and state government have been giving a lot of money for assets? So depreciation on those assets is money being supplied by
Yeah.
your collection.
Depreciation is as I said before, it's the main mechanism for ensuring intergenerational equity. It's also a really good mechanism for making sure that some of your operational income is set aside for asset renewal. But one of the very ordinary things that was done to local government in recent times, we have to abide by what's known as the local government accounting standard, and it's slightly different to commercial accounting. If on your farm you buy a piece of equipment, you probably work out that it's going to last, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. If it's a Toyota, it might last 20. But you can depreciate that over that estimated life and then replace it. And those numbers would flow through into your financial reports. And that's how we used to do it too. But in I think 2012, they changed the system, didn't they? So instead of using historical cost as the basis for depreciation, we now have to use replacement cost. So all of our assets are revalued mostly every 2 years, but some almost every year. And we've got to engage professional valuers. They assign values to those assets. We then work out how far through their life cycle they are, what condition they're in, and calculate some depreciation based on that. It's mission impossible. Our current depreciation cost is $4.5 million a year. It's great to get a government grant to rebuild the Lake Talbot water park, the pool. We spent a fair bit of money there, but now that facility is valued at 2 or 3 times what it was valued at, and that depreciation flows in. The people that run the accounting principles expect the council to set aside enough money to replace that thing when it needs to be replaced.
Council money makes money out of buying machinery anyway, because there's tax exempt when they buy it, and then they sell it, the tax goes on. So I know of other shires around, and unless it's changed of late.
That certainly used to be the case in the good old days, about when Paul Keating was Prime Minister. We could take advantage of the sales tax deductions. Not anymore. We don't make money. I don't know what you pay, but I pay a lot more than I get when it's traded back in. We don't make a profit on any of those things anymore. Used to 25 years ago. So, hopefully I've answered your question.
So George, we've got a $100,000 skywalk. Does that mean you've got to keep putting money aside to replace it when it's roughly low?
In theory, yes. Well, that's a good question. Is it worth it? So, most of those new things are aimed at the tourism industry, and they're also available for the locals if you want to use it. I've been on the Skywalk a couple of times, and I took visitors on last weekend. But there's always the question, is that investment in tourism worth it? So I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, what the tourism industry is worth to Narrandera Shire, but it is significant. It's a lot of money. And we have to capitalise on the fact that we're on the Newell, we're on the Sturt, we've got a steady flow of people going through. We want them to stop and spend some dough. So if mum and dad and 3 kids are coming through and they know that, we might stop for lunch because we can distract the kids, we can possibly go to the pool, put them on the Skywalk, maybe they'll spend their couple of $100 while they're here. So yes, it's always a question. Whether it was worth it to the local community, well, the construction of that thing didn't cost the local community much at all. Correct. Yeah. No. Now there is another aspect that's embedded in our financial analysis, and that is that we don't expect to fully fund depreciation. We don't expect that we'll ever be capable of renewing all of our assets, $303 million worth, when they immediately fall due by some technical assessment. There's a whole bunch of assets that we believe are fit for purpose, and we'll just keep them ticking along. It's a silly example, I know, but I use the toilet in the cemetery as an example. It's been there for a long time. It's fairly basic, but it does the job. We're not going to replace that. And we're applying that same principle to all the assets. So if they work, they're fit for purpose, keep your maintenance up, and you don't have to worry. But that doesn't work for everything. So things like Lake Talbot Pool, it was nearly at collapse when we rebuilt it. If we hadn't got the money when we got it, it'd be closed now. So it's a bit of a balancing act. So what happens if we can't increase our income? Logic says that we've got to decrease our expenditure. And there's some things that we don't have a choice over, like the ESL and other things, but there's a number of things where we do have a choice. And typically those things are the services that the council provides. And I think we provide about 80, if you wanted to sit down and make a list. If the SV doesn't go ahead or is unsuccessful, we believe the council can't keep going as it is currently at the moment. Probably could keep going for a little while, not indefinitely. We've already been told that some of the grant programs we've relied on are going to disappear. State government's already abolished the grant program that was responsible for refreshing this building, the Stronger Country Communities Fund, and it was immensely valuable right across the Shire. Unfortunately, the Labor new government has ditched it. We know that costs will keep going up, so goodness only knows where fuel's going to be in 6 months' time. The silly buggers overseas keep doing what they're doing. And we know that compliance will never stop. So there's some things that we don't have control over. We would have to look at our service levels, the facilities that we open to the public, where we can make some changes. So at the moment, for example, and I'm not suggesting this is going to happen, but the library's open 6 days a week, 40-something hours a week. It might have to go back to something much less. At the moment, we grade our roads on a certain rotation, we mow our parks on a rotation. We'd have to look at those things to see if we can save some dough. Fees and charges.
What about making sure that poor people aren't putting up signs? How do we look at those little things and go,
I agree. And I can tell you, I'll be asking a question tomorrow. That's right. So,
let's ask them if they don't want that done because we can say X amount of dollars.
yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do, if you make a submission, and I know that some of you will, I hope you do, is have a think about that. Have a think about...
Do we have to write submission that don't need all people to resign?
No. But you could say, don't mow my road verge.
I've said that 10 times, no one got me.
Have you written it in though?
Any email, I told them to turn back to gravel, then I wouldn't do this like that.
What I'm asking you to do is put your mind to things where you believe the council could save money, and productivity's one of them, for sure. Has to be. We would look at fees and charges. You would not believe the number of times that we get asked to waive the fee. Probably happens here in this hall. Every community group's got no money. They want to do something. So they put their hand up and say, yeah, well, we can do this, but we don't want to pay your charge. And usually the council will say, okay, we can see the community benefit in that, so we'll waive the fee. You know, that's a really good example of quite a substantial amount of money that went into that building came from the ratepayers of this shire, not just the grant. I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. If you can... No. But if you can get the Narandra Eagles off the bottom, I'll think about what you're asking. We've got the best ground in the league and the worst team. And please don't quote me. But it's a really good, you know, I'm pleased you mentioned it because it is a good example of the investment by the community in a facility, and I haven't got the numbers for the sports ground on the top of my head, but it's a lot. Oh yeah. Well, I did include the stadium in my report to council, and I'm thinking that it was around $100,000 loss a year. It's important, and the council believes that, and absolutely those sorts of things are part of what I talked about earlier about quality of life for everyone, and not just the people that live in the town. Farmers' kids play sport. You know, we need to have those things there for them. But looking at fees and charges, so that's a place, you know, you'd have to start to think about. The stormwater upgrade would go back on the shelf until we got a grant to fund all of it. Now that's possible.
Can that be segmented at all? Yeah, I was just curious to see, you know, sometimes upgrading one section alleviates another instead of doing another. Yeah.
It's not that simple. The main problem is at the top end, the bottom three, the manufacturer there, it's going to disperse everywhere. So we're up the top end.
We got stuck in 2012.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. It was, we pulled.
Yeah, yeah.
So now we looked at all of those, and in the end, maybe there's one station across at 10 kilometres, so that would be the first component to go in, which could relieve some immediate pressure off the site. But apart from that, it's really station not going to go all through. We can get the system going.
I assumed that was the case, but you know, sometimes when consultants send things in, they have no clue.
No, we've been actively involved, so this has been the hydrologist first up and then into the design consultant structure, so.
Yeah. Obviously, if you put the bit in that catches the water, you've got to deal with it somehow. You've got to get it away. And, you know, you mentioned the water coming down the hill.
I don't doubt that needs doing. I just wanted to be really, really clear on
Yeah, no, that's fine.
in town when the storms in the
Kids would go off and buy those, the surfing, the water going down.
Yeah.
Most of the people who agree with us, I understand my goals, we're talking about moving 8,000 litres a second, split apart. And we've got to have the rest of it.
So I can.
That's a lot of water to be moving if you only 100 litres. Could have been 10 on the front.
So that's the stormwater. Asset renewal would depend more, almost entirely on grants, and some of those opportunities I talked about would be lost or.
You want to talk to the 35 people that are evacuated at Sandigo with the 11% mortality rate? Absolutely.
I just was about to say exactly the same thing.
But people pay insurance, and this, we pay for this work to be done, and they still got to pay insurance.
No, they won't be insurance. That's the thing. That's the advice. There's another part about how we not get insurance. Can't answer that. Yeah, because
So as a business, they wouldn't go,
well, it goes across the residential area as well. So now because we know that there's a flood, let's not work flood because we've had a lot of it. We need to look at their flood plan. If we don't do anything, we're going to have to start to apply that. And the problem is the insurance companies apply that as well. So when you're in some of the dry areas, you think of the dry, yeah, Victoria Road and the like, you're going to be paying a flood excess on your you've got the chance to stay in Wellington, because it's a blanket, 500 blanket buffer and 500 water supply.
Yeah, me too. You're welcome to make those suggestions in your submission. And to be honest with you, we've had a lot of councils since the previous flood event. I can't remember when it was, but they were talking about 1948 or something. So it's not something that happens a lot, and it mightn't happen again. But we had 2 in a month, so. And 2012, was it? Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty scary, and if you want to really see it in action, go down to where it goes in the canal or into the river. It's. If I could get it there, Lake Talbot's on the other side of a pretty big hill. So opportunities would be lost. We'd have a reduction in staff numbers because that's what service levels are. And of course there'd be no chance of any or no need for a significant increase in salaries. But what you'd finish up with is a council that just lacked capacity. And yeah.
Call it what it is, and if we're not competitive with other towns,
George, who's going to actually decide on this?
I'm getting to that one. Yes. Yep.
and are you open to other proposals with some different year structure options for this, or does it have to be the one we're doing?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be anything. As I said, I think at the beginning, the purpose of tonight is to give you the information you need to form a view, to understand why this is happening, what is driving it, and to make a submission with your considered opinion. And the councillors, led by the Mayor, will have all of those submissions before them at the November council meeting. Now, they will make a decision there as to whether they're prepared to lodge an application with IPART. If that answer is no, a la Leeton Council, I'll start the process of implementing the outcomes for no result. If the answer was yes, then we'll start putting the application together. It has to be lodged with IPART, I think it's the 4th of February, but it's certainly the first week in February that has to be in by. They will make sure the application is complete, and then they'll start an assessment process, and part of that is advertising that they do here. So they will invite submissions from the public on our proposal. So you'll have another chance to put forward your views. I expect IPART to make a decision April. That will come back to the council, and that could be yes or no. If it's no, nothing will happen. If it's yes, then the council will have to make a decision about whether it actually proceeds to implement.
Does do they have capacity to make a variation to what you propose? So they might say no to X, but yes to 20% or something, or do they not, is that not something?
They don't typically do that, but I'm not telling them that they can't. They're an independent body, and they'll make the decision. So just to help you, all of this material is on our website. We've got a landing page there called Special Variation. There's a couple of things on there that you'll find useful. One is the predictor. If you want to get told again what it means for your property. And there's also a Have Your Say page. So if you don't want to fill out a form or send an email in, you can type directly into that a submission, press the button, it goes into the system. Now you'll get an acknowledgement, but you won't get a response until after the council have made their decision. But as I said, all of those submissions will go to the council. This is a community engagement program that we've been involved in. And in the box in the middle, you can see the list of community meetings that we've had. This is actually the fourth meeting. I had one this afternoon for the staff. Out of those 100 employees, there's probably 70 that are ratepayers. We had a meeting to explain all of this to them. Not everyone is involved in the preparation of this stuff, particularly the work staff, and it will directly affect them. So there's 2 more meetings. If there are people that you know that were unable to get here tonight, just remind them. There's 2 more opportunities, one on Wednesday morning in the club at Narandra, and one the following week in the evening. Now, without giving them undue publicity, the community have organised their own meeting on Monday evening at the club as well, and they say that that's open to everyone to go. We haven't been invited, so you won't have to see this again, but there might be a gathering of like minds that might help you with your submission. So I've just explained the process from there. I think that's about all I need to talk about, other than to answer any other questions that you might have.
Is there a figure, something like a total figure for resident business amount of rates they pay compared to rural land, and is that pro rata on the increase as such, or the amount that's going to be increased?
Yes, I think I had a slide that showed the yield from each of those categories.
On a value basis, like if town area valued at 100 million and rural land at 100 million, is it the same yield on that value?
No.
Because the residents is paying a different figure
Yeah.
than rural.
Yeah. I can tell you that I was surprised. I saw those valuation figures today. Across the Shire, the land values are just short of $2 billion, and the vast majority of that is farmland. I don't remember the numbers. Yes, John, that's what we've been talking about. That 58% is the contribution that's made at the moment, and unless council changes the balance, that'll continue.
We pay more, but we get less. Improvements.
Not necessarily, we pay them more and we have the less capacity to utilise, not even utilise, to set where our revenue's coming from. That's the issue.
Well, the farm roads are deteriorating year on year, whereas the town roads are, they're increasing in capacity year on year.
Well, I think that I've made it fairly clear here that one of the outcomes of this process will be more money for that rural road system. I don't know whether the town roads are getting any better. We're not spending a lot of money in town.
There's been 42 kilometres of new seal put on rural roads last year, and about 500 metres in now. That's because nothing's already done. But again, it's still an improvement. If it would have just been, it's 42 kilometres is a lot of new seal in rural areas across any council.
Well, I think because of the cost of gas.
Also because we plan to get some grant funding and all that, yes, but we still, council still dissolved use in those areas.
Yeah, and Lee's comment is true. All of the services that the council provides are available to all residents, but you've got to work a bit harder to get yours or to make use of those. So you've got to drive to town.
We don't have a set income coming in that makes it easier to budget for such a gigantic increase. That's probably where my critical
Yeah.
element comes in. Like, there's a few factors that, like I said, it's oranges and apples when we talk the residents in town to the people that are trying to produce income in the rural areas. And I have been failing to see how I can make it add up for the amount that we're going to have to pay when we have no guarantee of income to support it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does to me.
Yeah.
Between three of us, we pay 100 grand in rates between three of us, three neighbours. We get a road grader goes down the road maybe once every 3 years. Just explain to me what that is.
Well, I'm not personally familiar with your circumstance to start with, but I would hope that if the road needs grading, that happens. Now, there's some roads that don't need grading every 12 months. They last longer, it depends on the usage and the material that the road's built out of. So we have a process where if you have a concern about a section of road, you can let us know and we can respond. But the standard of road maintenance is pretty typical across the Shire. So depending on the class of the road, that's how often it's graded if it's needed.
So which road are you referring to there?
The road runs down in between,
What's the name?
my property and most road. It's been graded in the last 12 months and they put gravel on it, but prior to that,
What's the weather?
you have done,
Oh, there you go.
you have done now.
Yeah, geez,
But I should have brought my wife because we've been married 23 years and she reckons she's seen the road grader 4 times in her life. Like, so it's not just me.
I encourage anyone that has concerns with their roads to contact us. As you can appreciate, we've had a whole council area that's been quite affected, so we've had to prioritise. Unfortunately,
Yeah, I was going to say something important then. Shane's staff are working on the road improvement program that will be put in place over the next, I think, 3 years. I'm not sure. A bit like that unsealed road program that's up there for the next 12 months. When that program is developed, I'm sure Shane and I would be more than happy to sit down here with you and go through that to see if we've got the right roads and got the right ideas. We don't want to spend money on roads that don't need upgrading, but we don't want to miss out either. So I'll give you that undertaking, and that'll happen probably sometime early next year. And that won't depend on the rate variation. We've got some money for flood repair, and we've got to use that wisely. So I certainly value your input. Are there any others? Don't forget, try and get your submission in by the end of October. The council meeting's not until into November, but I need a little bit of time to put things together, get the agenda sorted, and sort out the issues to present a sensible report to the councillors. I'd just like to say thank you for your time tonight. It's really, I know our ask is big, and it will be painful if it is implemented. And I, for one, appreciate the manner in which you're engaging with us tonight. That's much appreciated. I do read the social media, and unfortunately, we've got folk in the Shire that are not as understanding. Thanks, Neville.
Thanks, George. Again, I'll reiterate what George has said. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for your input. We need your submissions. And also talking about the issues that you have from time to time. As Shane said, let us know about it. Let Shane know. You don't have to wait till the community consultation that we have once a year. Let Shane know. If nothing happens, come and see me. That's what I'm paid for, because I get paid a lot of money, don't I? Lucky this is being recorded, otherwise I might do some other things. But again, thank you so much for coming in, and don't forget to get those submissions in. Thank you to the staff that put all this together, because it has taken a lot of time. I, for one, have lost quite a bit of sleep over it, and I'm sure that probably George has as well, because it's a very significant thing that we're doing. We've never done it before, and I think it's probably one of the most important decisions this council's had to make. So, again, please let us know your feelings. You already have tonight, and we've got a decision to make, and we will. So, thank you very much.